You drink too much, just sit there staring in a mirror, and you're like, damn, I got monobrow. Fuck. Gotta trim that shit, bro. Why not get nose hairs? It's lame. I can tell you exactly which hairs on my neck make my beard go off kilter. I hate it.
I wish I could grow a beard in this area. I just glorify neck beard all the time.
That's really all you can do. And anybody who says like a perfect beard, fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not fair. No, like my shit grows down to like right here on my neck.
Yeah, like a neck beard, like a motherfucker.
Yep. So I just let it get long enough that it doesn't make a difference anymore.
Well. So, how we'll do this is for you. Think of it like a lecture.
Okay.
So how I do it is you clearly see I just treat this camera like an audience and I just talk to them.
And we're just talking about the beasts of the South.
Whatever you want. That's what I want to know. Like, do you want to just talk about that and kind of roll with it? Like, my videos, as you can tell, are very just like, we're talking about that.
Okay.
We can do that, or if you have something that you want to talk about or ask me, just go. I'll edit it later.
So,
just remember to look in the camera as much as you can.
So,
that way you don't have to look at me and feel weird.
I guess when establishing the beasts of the South and kind of what the range of reality that can exist there is, the first thing I think about is what I know about the beasts in Tantorum. And what I know about the beasts in Tantorum, for example, is that they have water dragons, but those are just alligators. So there isn't a precedent for a mythological reality of beasts in the setting, but at the same time, there's so much weird shit all over the place that I feel like there's some allowance for some fantasy. If there's giants and there's the Slop King, then then griffins aren't crazy.
Right.
In this world. Griffin's a lion bird, like it's not... So when establishing the beasts of the South, I guess we kind of have to run off of geography first and foremost to figure out what would actually make sense in those regions.
Yeah.
And we have to assess whether or not they're a rarity, a commonplace thing, their aggression level, their interactions with humanity. So griffins, for example, are an easy one to start with, even if we don't stick with like just the core griffin, if we just work with something off of that. Something akin to a griffin lives in this area, this mountainous region that's very favorable to them.
Okay.
But I have to assume that to some degree, they're like black bears.
Right.
It's not that you want to run up and pet one, but they're not really a concern for people. There's easier things to go after than us. We're not quite worth it. We're stringy, and they're intelligent. So they know kind of what the recourse for fucking with a population is.
Okay, yeah.
And I would imagine they're not solitary.
Like almost like more of wolves than you would imagine, like a feline.
Yeah,
they're kind of pack animal.
Yeah, they're more dog griffin than cat griffin.
Okay,
so to speak.
Yeah.
Because so in the South, we've already established there's great wolves.
Yep.
There's lycanthropy. Humans exist in tight knit, like they go from tight knit and then they slowly spread out in population, from like city to farmstead to hermitage, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be very weird for griffins to exist in a solitary fashion. They would have to be able to individually protect themselves from just about all of the dangers in the South. And in the mountains, where we already established that there's great eagles and a fluency of mankind, that would probably not fly. Because we're not talking about griffins that are like 20 feet tall, 50-foot fucking wingspan. We're talking about griffins roughly the size of a small horse.
Okay. Isn't that like how it was in The Witcher?
No,
there was
Witcher,
some...
they were big.
Oh, were they? Okay.
They were big.
There was those smaller ones. Maybe those the wyverns, dragons or something.
I don't actually remember.
I don't either. I haven't played in years. So my thinking is how I generally do this kind of stuff. I always say, that's great. I just got to convince Kevin. Okay. Right? So it's like, that's the one thing. So for me, like, it makes so much sense to say there are like in Albadan. Now, we discussed that there's these stones in the south, these kind of weird, God knows who put them there. We could say the Forgotten King, but we couldn't really prove it. Is this were they a creation of the Titans? As for the people, we don't quite know. Like, in world, they don't really know who made those massive stones, the obelisks as well, the black ones. But there are some up in the north, weirdly. And also, weirdly, there are giants up there. There are... I don't remember what I called them, but there were these lumbering beasts that seemed to be made of the earth that were about 100 to 50 feet tall. Just big, roaming, four-legged creatures that were just like, they were very gentle. They were called gentle giants. They're more akin to like, what is it called when the dinosaurs only ate leaves and berries and shit?
They're herbivorous.
Yes. Now that's how I imagine them. It's weirdly, there's also some strange creatures up there. I actually made a bestiary based on each culture. I don't think I ever printed it out, but I do have it where I took whatever influence I kind of had with, I'm making Lyria, I'm thinking more Sumerian, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what kind of myths do they have about creatures? And I just kind of played with that idea. You know, or the Celtic people. So there's more fairies up north as well, just like there is the south. And so on and so on. Now, for me, it makes sense that this world would be inhabited by beings that were created by the Titans. Yes. For whatever reason. So I remember in the story that the darker beasts were made by Theus to counteract some of the things that Dove had been doing. Now, I just had her flip the roles there because of our news story. But I just like think of Tantorum every time as the stopgap. Like, oh, all these cool ideas. Here's Tantorum. How do they handle it? Oh, God. Like, what?
The way I kind of think about it, as time has gone on, the reason this chunk is so weird is because the way I've been processing it is the further south you go along the map, the more primeval and wacky it gets.
It does.
So, like, up here, Etrovia, the Empire, I would figure you'd only see things that we're used to for the most part there. Maybe some exotic things, like a fucking leopard or some shit, but that's imported. They bought that.
Yeah.
For the most part, you see what we would consider very normal animals up there. And then the further south you go, like in Tantorum, they've got alligators.
Yeah.
But they're massive alligators. They're water dragon alligators, right? So it's like, why? Because this is supposedly like with the temperate sea of like North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Why are there alligators here, and why are they like 36 feet long?
Oh boy.
And so already from there to there, from this reality to this reality, we're seeing wacky shit. I would figure there's giant goats in the mountains of Tantorum. Things like that. Where it's grounded, but it's exaggerated. It's mythologized. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then once you cross the channel, that's when you get into... So you go from everything's perfectly normal, everything is what you know what it is, but it's a bit much. And then I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. And that's kind of how I pictured that jump gap.
Would you imagine that there's some sort of taint going on that could be causing this, or is this purely based on, evolution?
So evolution partially, because this is a young world. So in the grand scheme of things, like when it's one of those it's one of those weird realities like mammoths were around when the pyramids were being built.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I picture we are.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird moment of time.
But I also imagine that for all the great beasts, the things that you could consider passively threatening, right? For just not being at all in tandem with man's ability to deal with, so he'd have to gang up and really focus on killing it off. I picture Tantorum did that.
That kind of makes sense. Like, the reason it's so fucked up the more south you get is because, well, mankind isn't really stretched beyond those limits.
And they have a different kind of, I guess, primitive animalism about... They don't want to wipe it out, per se.
Okay.
There's, like, a balance to be had there for them. So, when it comes to, like, griffins might be a threat to people. They might try to steal children from time to time. But also...
Like a bear would, but we're not having a genocide on bears.
Right, exactly. And they don't picture it as more threatening because it flies.
Right.
They don't think of it... And it's not really that they can be tamed or used or they're good for anything, but that if you wipe them all out, they're not there to test yourself against anymore. And if you wipe them all out, suddenly the ecology of the entire region changes.
These guys are very understanding of that.
Yes. They're very focused on keep this environment the way it is. It's sustained us and it's done us this well because it's the way it is, not because we've changed it.
Right. How do you think do you think that idea that we had about the Aeonic cursed race in the South, the forgotten race, remember how we were spitballing, like, well, what's happening in the mist, or with Marcus Cardis, or like over in the Merfolk, where there's this kind of weird darkness is coming from the world. Does that story still make sense? The threat in the South, the timetable threat.
It does, but only... Okay, so it would only make sense in one very specific context. And that what's happening in the Mist and Marcus Cardis and the Merfolk is in fact happening in the South, and it's connected to the Seeing Stones and the Black Stones of the South. But that the South is an example of, whereas these three places nobody was ever able to really super establish in, at least directly around the problem. So like the Merfolk people learn to live in the Merfolk, but they don't... I don't know how to say, because I don't want to imply like a weakness in their abilities. They've learned to live in the Merfolk, not with the Merfolk.
Mm-hmm.
They've mastered living in it and dealing with it, but they've not learned to be a part of it masterfully. The South has learned to be a part of the South. There are giants that are a threat down here. There are Seeing Stones up here. These things are clearly connected. The gigantism in the South, the level of like mystery, the dark forest, don't fuck with the woods, things like that. But whereas with the Trinity Forest, you're straight up and at odds with it in this whole region, where it's like, yeah, you go into the woods, they'll kill you if they get you. In the South, it's like, no, we work with the woods.
Right.
It's the same fucking woods as up there for the most part, but we work with them. At some point, some hero walked in and walked out with knowledge. And from then on, we're doing what he said.
Rhodes? Sorry, Rhodesis?
Yes. And now we're in communication with the people who are in there.
That's a life-changing moment. That's cultural.
Yes. Especially for a man leading his army, for his army to suddenly walk through the woods relatively peacefully. And to see how far reality outside of the woods that they were burning down is different from that. To now let it go, and now it's spreading again. If the Trinity Forest was to break out and start conquering all these places, how different would the ecology look in those places from then on?
Right. Now, here's what this has triggered in me. That must mean that the that the Anaku hold a very, very high power in that area alone. More so than the other. Like, you'll see Anaku doing different things in different areas. I mean, the last video I just made was the philosophy of the Anaku, which I'll link. But the idea of, with what you just said, in my mind, makes me think, okay, not only are, like I said, are the Anaku, do they have a power that's a little bit more than we'll ever understand? Being that they were created by the Titans, being that the Titans created the worlds, there's a connection there, but it also makes me think of the secondary thing. Why have they relented their hatred for mankind? It's just interesting to see their story. Like, why did they say, well, no, it's mankind? Like, what I'm trying to say is, if they have this power, then they're at one with nature. If they're at one with nature, then they're still in communion with a Titan. Then they so worship a Titan. That Titan does not like an Aeonic race.
So, okay. This question's actually fairly easy to answer. If these Anaku were in communion with the Titan, And these Anaku direct these men to worship the Forgotten King. Which Titan would give that prerogative?
Dove. So you're saying that these might be the last true Anaku that worship Dove, the trapped Anaku in Kramos. Sorry, wow, the trapped Titan in Kramos.
Yes. And it might not be that they're the last ones, but they're the most effective ones.
So far.
Yes.
I haven't discovered another Anaku race that even...
Because the only explanation you have to give for why the ecology of the South has stayed as it was in the forest is because here they're not only not being opposed, they're being assisted by the southern cults.
Right.
So right there, power amplify. If they can give humanity any of the control of the environment, humanity is now helping them do their job for them. And that could simply be, like, you don't even have to impart benevolence on them for that. That could be simply a sustainable decision, realizing they're probably not going to be here in a couple hundred years.
Right.
So they're trying to pass on the mission. But if they're in communion with Dove, and Dove is edifying the Forgotten King for whatever his own motivations in that are, and so he's... It's a weird combo of them continuing Anaku magics throughout the area that keep the world young and primeval. And it could be that Rhodesis, maybe the reason they saw an opportunity in him or saw that was because the Anaku were so much about balance and your nature. And if they saw Rhodesis as, not to insult him, but a primitive, simply doing what he does, rather than the rest of his siblings who are so actively, like, convincing themselves of Tan's message. If Rhodesis is just running purely on his instinct, his gut feelings, they could see him and go, oh, we could actually show him something that might change his ways. If confronted with a hard truth within himself, he changes his mind. That's an opportunity we haven't had from any of these other men. Because all the other leaders of mankind are so certain of their decision. He's not. He's just running with the best he has. He only holds himself to the best he has. Not his correctness.
I know how we can do this, too. So, Dove is the creator of the Forgotten People. The race of people that you called the Dizarine once. I changed it. Instead of Anaku, that are Dizarine. The Dizarine are the Forgotten People. That is his people that grew alongside with the Anaku, that were better than the Anaku in some sense, in some way. That's what started this kind of thing between Thies and Dove, okay? So those people were wiped out. Plain and simple, just right there. At the War of the Gods, when the Anaku and the Titans warred against the Aeons and the Descendants, which were the Dizarine, that's where the Dizarine were destroyed and the Forgotten King was captured, right? My thinking is, if these Anaku were to, I don't know about worship or just be reverent to Dove, then they must understand that Rhodesis, much like the stone line on our side of the line, that Rhodesis, his mother, was a forgotten person. Which means he has this blood, like, that's what makes the bloodline strong. Because they're mixing with the original people. There was Anaku, then there was the Dizarine. Then the Aeons and all that shit were born. So, like, third kind of people. But there was this combating thing. So, like, for instance, Theseus down to his son, Eclectus, Neopak, then Eris's father, whoever. Those are the people that have even longer lives because they're half Aeon, mankind, half Dizarine. That was supposed to be why that they're chosen, if you will. Meaning, Rhodesis, I don't know about his sibling, but he might be, well, they're twins, aren't they? So they would both have been born from their father, was the father Tanias?
Yes.
Was that the father?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Tanias would have had a child with a Dizarine, essentially. One of the last ones. Because, they were thought to have been destroyed, but then you find, like, oh, there's a couple in hiding. Maybe it's the same one taken from Odysseus. I don't know. fun little area to explore. But that could explain why there's a weird, like, they sensed out, like, Rhodesi's like, this one's different. He could understand.
So do the Anaku have, like, I guess, in terms of, like, if you were to look at it as a race or an ethnicity, do they have, like, a cousin mindset towards the Dizarine? Would they see themselves as we're of the same shit?
As much as an elf and a dwarf. You know what I mean? Like,
in, like, the Elder Scrolls sense?
In Lord of the Rings. So they're not really. They're separate. They're a separate being. Like, I don't have any examples in our real world because there's just humans. It's not a race thing. It's more like, well, it is, but it's not like the races we know in real life, like black and white. We're talking like dwarf and elf.
We can quantify that there's like, we're like 99% the same, and the 1% that we're not is fucking eye color.
Yeah.
Whereas for them, like, no, there's genuine, I have rocks in my veins.
This was a people secondary created by Dove for unknown purposes, right? This is before the Whisper got involved. This is before the fall, and then the whole thing happened between Theis and then the battles and the Forgotten King. This is before that.
And the Forgotten King was a Dizarine.
And the Forgotten King was an Aeon. The Forgotten King is named Oapake. He is an Aeonic person from another realm.
Okay.
This is according to the old stories.
I'm getting all fucking mixed up.
According to all the old stories, these people, these so that's what I can keep calling that. These forgotten people, for whatever reason, not Dove necessarily as their progenitor, but the Forgotten King, a god. That's saying, like, you think you were a king to these people, you are a long forgotten people. That's like a bad name he's been, That's why he is these people, and there was a reverence towards him. So that's why they were made by Dove. Dove is the progenitor to the Forgotten King, as you had laid out, remember?
Did Dove make the Dizarine for?
I don't see there. It's blank, so we could say. But all I know is he made these people, and they loved the fucking what's his face. I don't know if they were made specifically for fucking what's his name, Oapake. But they could have been. There's no proof either way of why they were created.
So who brought the Whisper?
As we have in the notes, it's hard to keep it straight. I have like 50 different versions of like, well, this is why the Whisper was brought. But I have the recording of me and you discussing how the Whisper was brought. You kind of remember that at all?
Vaguely.
Okay. I'm following that. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, that's the new guideline of how the Whisper works.
If I remember properly, it was Theis who introduced the Whisper to the equation.
Yes, he used it as a tool, right? Unbeknownst to what the Whisper really is, and unbeknownst to what the Whisper really wanted, he was trying to use it as a tool.
And currently, as I understand it, Dove is a being, he's a Titan, he's a being of love.
Yes, he was, Dove had the fucking Whisper cast upon him. Somehow they learned to live intermingled with each other, and Dove was the one who realized that the Whisper is the true higher force in everything that they understand. Outside from the darkness, he's the true being. He might even be God. God is acting through him. So Dove is the one who allowed the Whisper to do these things. Dove is the one who helped the Forgotten King. Because of the Whisper's aid. The Whisper wants to make everything right again. Remember, he's the Grim Reaper. He wants to make everything right again. He's using these people as tools. When Theis found out, that's why he cursed them into the sun and trapped them both. And then years later, when the Forgotten King was captured, oh, you fucking cunt, bitch. After that, okay, fuck, where was I? I'm sweating just thinking about this shit.
Fucking Dove and the Whisper cursed into the sun. So what if to Dove, he heard the Whisper coming, it was cast upon him as an attack. It didn't turn out that way. But what if to a being as old and enlightened as Dove, and as aware, the Whisper didn't come as a whisper, it came as a scream. And so he started preparing.
Right.
Because he knew these soft, these fragile little races, the Anaku who couldn't quite defend themselves, And mankind, who is so young and so unaware,
Yeah, that was like fetal state, mankind at that point.
can't defend themselves against what's coming next. So he needs to give them something. And so Dove goes to the greatest of these Aeonic men that he knows.
Yep.
The oldest and the wisest. And says, I'm going to make you a people. You need to protect yours. They're only here to help you. They're only here to save you.
Why?
Because if death is being cast upon the world to make it right,
Yeah.
and Dove knows that death is being cast upon the world to make it right, and Dove knows death is coming for not only the Anaku, but mankind, and he knows these things haven't done anything wrong, and in fact, he'll create this world. He knows how good it can be. He needs to give them a chance to prove it. And if the Whisper is God coming to set things right, then God needs to see
Right.
that it's worth them being here, even if just for a little while.
Okay.
This wasn't all a mistake, so he makes them beings of pure light to guide them out of the forest.
But you remember in your story of Tan that they had to flee from those people, the Dizarine that were trapped in the wood. And later, the story of Tanias, he destroyed all the people of the Trinity Forest. And I know because he was acting under the guise of Theus, who said he was Dove. The story says, no, Dove is the one who freed them. I am Dove, and I am freeing you from the woods here, right? Story of Tan and all that. Then later, it's Dove who's talking to Tanias, the son of Tan. We know that it was Theus, pretending to be him, to destroy mankind, to destroy all the things that the Whisper had set up. Because after the Great War, after the Forgotten Kings being captured, the story of Tan will begin in some time. This hasn't even been born yet. Then they leave the forest. Then in the story of Tanias is when the Forgotten King, he's meanwhile still alive in prison. Like when Tanias is roaming the world in the 400s, the Forgotten King's like alive. Trapped in a fucking ward of the great life tree. That's where he gets destroyed because his brother, Ag Beovac, the Slop King, betrays him. Him and Theus work together. He goes up. When he's freed from his prison, he curses Ag Beovac, and Dove takes him, because the whole point, the Forgotten King wanted to free Dove from the sun. Well, Dove couldn't stay here, and the Forgotten King, so they vanished into the ethereal area, what cannot be reached by Theus anymore, because the bridge was closed. So that's the whole point of like the stone line are the people that are descendants. Well, the descendant of the first human and the first Dizarine. Those ones are the ones that are able to commune and are being communed with by the Whisper. Those ones that you created, the chosen by Whisper prophecy, the ones that were betrayers of. You remember when you were kind of working on that?
Yeah.
Well, the ones that were chosen by the Whisper are the ones that are later taught are like the Whisper is bad. The only people that think the Whisper is bad are Ag Beovac and his slaves and the Anaku. Everyone else is kind of like, well, we don't really know what the Whisper is.
The South straight up calls him the Song.
If you're an Anaku, to you, the Whisper is, he helped the curse fucking, like, he made Dove go nuts in their mindset. He made Dove kind of fucking go mad and like, Dove betrayed us. He made a whole other race and this whole fucking thing happened. So that's, no Anaku's going to be like, oh, I'm down with fucking the Whisper. Ag Beovac was betrayed by the Whisper, and he was on an alliance with Theus and a promise for some shit, to which now he's trying to do his things. So anyway, you're telling me that Rhodesis perhaps might be part of that line. I really hope that makes sense as I laid it out. Does that make
It
any
makes sense as much as anything does in this book. So, Dove makes the Dizerim to protect mankind and lead them out of the woods. Thais turns mankind on the Dizerim.
Yeah. Yeah, he had to have, because when he, in your story, it was worded in such a way where they had to get away from the Forsaken Ones. And that's what they were called. At least that's how you said what Dizerim means, is Forsaken Ones. I just said, or Forgotten Ones. The idea of that, born... Originally, Dove was going to be the bad guy, but then we kind of went like, well, maybe Thais is, and Dove was the one that was like Prometheus. Like, that's a development that happened on 10/11/2022. It's a new idea.
Dove, trapped in the sun, communes with the Anaku of Ludnese, the Ludnese Anaku.
Right before the events, yeah. Okay.
And lets them know,
that makes a lot of sense.
Listen to the song. When you hear the song, listen to the song. It'll tell you what to do.
Of course, yeah. What year was that? I have it on the other one. I'm trying to remember what year so I can keep it all straight.
Listen to the song, remember the king.
That must have been, then it would have been taught to... This is where it's interesting, right? So there's two things that this is interesting with. One, the timeline is unfinished for your country, right? From year 500 when they entered, or somewhere around there, we don't know what happens. We also don't know who had what. So did Rhodesis have children, blah, blah, blah. Like, when did that line disappear? Because what you're saying is that there had to have been with these higher chosen people, born under Janias, right? We're going to call it the descendants line to keep it simple. We don't know when that disappeared. We don't know when the fucking... how they were taught this idea of harnessing the song. And how is that different from non-chosen people? For instance, a mage that's the son of Jesus is going to be a little bit more involved than a mage from the son of Josiah, or Shem. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference here. So I'm just wondering how that works in the South, where you have a mage that's...
Probably pretty clear if anybody kept track of anything.
And they didn't.
Nope, not a fucking thing. Rhodesis had kids.
They're like Celts.
Yeah, they're like 10 kids. Nobody, who were they?
So they're literally like how the Celts are. We're like, did you guys ever write anything down? They're like, well,
nope.
we drew some cool pictures.
Yeah. We got conquered, all of Western Europe got conquered by a giant once. Yep, we know his name. Who killed him? I don't know. Some guys.
Does it really matter at the end of the day?
Somebody did. Yeah, no, very, and that's the thing is, like, a claim to the line of Rhodesis or a claim to the line of, like, Sisrane, that's a thing that is said, but it's always more or less just said. It's unverifiable. Mm-hmm. So after enough people claimed it over a period of time, you don't really know. It's assumed that people who achieve great things in the South are of great lines. But that's an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
That's an entirely unsubstantiated, unverified assumption. The champion of the South, Alistair becomes the champion of the South. Some people would refer to him as a descendant of Rhodesis. That's unsubstantiated. That's maybe that's why he's so great.
There's no proof of it.
Right.
As a writer, though, what do you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably Geralt is probably of the line of Sisranes. All of the merchant princes, all of them, are almost certainly of the line of fucking Seozis.
Okay, so I know that you said in Southern culture they don't really give a flying fuck about that kind of stuff.
No.
But as someone who's created the South, how much does it have to play with the prophecy of it? So the descendant line, think of it like they are on the This is... Okay.
I can explain this.
The descendant line... I just want to get it in here. The descendant line are the people that, as we stated, were born from this and born from that. But they also are the only prophecy bringers. And the prophecy bringers are in 4 stages. Chosen by the whisper, betrayer of the whisper, and then another two that I don't remember. But we're basing it off a system that you created, where there's 4 different prophecies always at works at all times. Okay, so we'll just keep that in mind. To keep that in mind.
So, because so much of the South is based around these seeing stones, these black stones of communion with ethereals, it was less a factor of, and of Tan's kids, 4 of them went south.
Yeah. Yep.
2 of them stayed north, 4 of them went south. So the South is the heaviest presence of this bloodline. Because of the religious communion with these stones, the last messages of Dove before he left, and the communion with these Anaku who revered the Dizarin, and heard more or less the last words of Dove before he left our plane. I would say it was less a matter of which bloodline, who, what, but more a matter of the South so regularly as a culture submitting to that idea that eventually somebody was going to turn up.
Right.
That it was less a prophecy for a place and time and more a prophecy for them of an eventuality.
Right.
More like King Arthur. One day.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the year 2025, King Arthur's going to come back and free the Britons from the oppressive nature of Germans and Romans.
Right.
But at some point in the fucking future, indiscriminately, these bloodlines will reawaken and act.
Okay.
And it's fitting that there's characters from every section of the continent. Because it means all of them. It's that happenstance. All of the bloodlines eventually met back up and started acting.
Right.
They probably have several times in the past, which is why occasionally the South just does some crazy shit. When the South coalesces into a single unit, as it did in, for example, the trade wars, it becomes a massive force of world change. As we said, looking at the map, it seems like this is a rough area to live, short population. This is a really verdant, nice area, but it's short population. It's small. It's a few cities and a lot of hamlets. Fucking uninhabitable, giants and shit. Really advanced Etrovian Empire, scattered, mountainy, islands. Dubois has some pretty good land there, but they've spent the entirety of their existence beating their heads against their neighbors. Then there's the South, which is where you get, this is just a whole fucking stretch of good populous land. This is not. And then you got this, which is like, it's a bit hilly, but it's not like fuck off mountains.
Right.
It's still pretty there. It's still pretty there. Good farmland, good ranch land, all that kind of shit. Then you got this border of the forest, and then some phenomenal industrial land up here. That whole thing, that's the most valuable country on the map. Those guys, when they get motivated, do all kinds of shit.
Like Russia.
Yeah. Where it's just like, what's their secret? Well, magically they have everything.
What's that? Not on purpose. Left. Captain might be on his way.
Neat.
Oh boy.
So it was just an eventuality that one of the bloodlines, and it just happens that we focus on Alistair, who is of the bloodline of Rhodesis, assumedly. Geralt, the reason there's any focus on him is because he's clearly of the bloodline of Cicerones. And then I hadn't really thought about the bloodline of Siomzes much, but
yeah.
I know I shoehorned like 3 Merchant Prince characters in there, and one of them can matter at some point.
Yeah, I don't remember even.
But also, Siomzes was known for being the most temperate of the 3 down there. So that's good that he's the less stressful to figure out. His descendant, whoever he or she may be, is by far the easiest one to make a presence for.
Okay.
Because if he's in line with that bloodline and that behavior, then he's a force of temperance and logic and reason.
You know what's funny? The what is it called? The fucking Rhodesis' sister. What's her name again? Cicerones?
Cicerones.
is the only woman in the descendant line.
So far.
So far. I mean, if you look at Adrana from Odysseus down, there's no women. So there's just none in our culture. It just never happened for whatever reason.
And that's, I think that's kind of reminiscent of the fact that, and I would say this is one of the core differences. From the Southern perspective, none of these prophecies have a timeline. They're just happening as they happen, right?
Yeah.
So if Adran is keeping track of the bloodline and Adran is a patriarchal society, predominantly, who are they going to keep track of? And as they come to this head, we're like, now it's down to Eris, and there isn't actually another heir past him that we know of. Now the prophecy has to accelerate. So what are they doing? They're acting. They're going now. Tantorum, if they have a similar idea, they don't, but if they had a similar idea, they'd be doing that same thing.
Well, the last one, and then this is the interesting thing, the last one that we know is Markethos, who died in the year 510. And then your guys died in the 500s, early 500s as well. So from that point, this is a blank slate. We can do whatever we want.
Right.
It's just it has to be done, like how I did mine, which was painstaking, and that's why I only chose men. I just said, like, maybe in our culture, like, we don't give a fuck because it's a male-dominant passing, like it is in real life.
I can call this out before we chart it all down as meta-knowledge. Dude, it's way bigger in the South. There's so many of these fuckers. Okay. And they didn't keep track because they didn't think it mattered.
Right.
That's just not something that occurred to them or that they were
What
taught.
we could do in story is say, like, what they do in real history, whereas to find who are kings of what, trade manifests. When language started becoming a thing. Well, now they're trading with this guy, now they're trading with that, so he must have been here. And then it'll say, like, well, in his realm of blah, blah, blah. So other cultures is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Could fill in the blanks of, well, no, during this time, Erazion was trading with these guys, and they were dealing with a man named blah, blah, blah. Or a woman.
And this was the merchant prince of this city. And
so that's how we can do it in lore. That's why it's foggy. They'll be like, yeah, so there's this guy, and then we don't know for 200 years. But then there's like this guy. Like,
but occasionally you get a really obvious one in the South because they're like 8.5 feet fucking tall.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, so that guy clearly.
The big one.
Just means somebody.
Hmm.
That actually comes through in. I know on Alistair's side, I never named his parents, but it was his mother. That's where he gets all of this from, if he gets it from anywhere. For example, his inclination towards hearing the song, he got that from his mom.
Yeah.
His dad was this very just muted, uninterested, not a bad character, but just uninterested in the greater workings of the world. He had a simple look about the world. His mother was the one who put crazy ideas in his head.
Hmm. Interesting. That would be Eris's mother, too. That took care of him. His dad was apparently his stepfather. His real dad was killed.
And for Geralt, it's Haradra.
Yeah.
It's his dad that has that bloodline, which is why his dad is so capable. But it's the nature of Cisranes that they be at conflict with each other.
Okay. We have a southern moment. Again. Southern moments. Just because the battery, probably. But this was a good long video.
But yeah, so beasts in the South.
Right.
We got griffins in the fields. Coming from the hill areas, they're a problem for the fields, but we got wyverns. Wyverns can go out pretty fucking far. They're flying creatures, and the westerly winds make them much more apt to target this area, and they'll tend to fly out and then make like 3 pit stops hopping back. You got mammoths in the south and giant bears, big fucking bears, and you have draken bears. Draken bears are just bears with scales. Okay. Big fucking bears with scales.
Wow, that's creepy.
They don't hibernate. That's the real difference. They think this is a product of the stones, that there is some sort of reptilian cross in them, that they do not sleep through the winter, they actively hunt through the winter. They tend to not wander too far north, but when they do, hunting parties, because them shits can be a problem. They can be very aggressive. You got giants in the south, and the giants tend to eat everything, so there's an abundance of wildlife in the south, but it's not radically different from the northern south, just because anything that was that dangerous, the giants killed.
Okay.
And there's sea serpents.
Oh, Krykos. Water, fuck. Kryko dragons or some shit.
Yep.
I don't remember what I called them, but yeah, I had some names for them.
Yep, sea serpents. Trying to think, because you got this tundra area. There's not an abundance of big cats in the south. Simply never has been. Everything in the south is very dog-like.
Yeah, seems to be.
And there's great hawks. Big fucking birds. Just massive fucking birds. They're more of a problem than the griffins. They're bigger than the griffins.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. Bigger than the griffins. They live a little bit in the hills of this region. You'll get great birds nesting from time to time, but they really, really come from the mountains around the sea area.
Okay.
And sparsely throughout the mountains, moving further northwards. They have an easier time moving around the south safely than they do Dubois.
Okay.
Dubois is a fan of gunpowder.
Yeah.
The south is a fan of make it not worth it for them. Cows with long hair. They got cows with long hair.
Like yaks and
Yep.
what are they called? Brahmin or something? I don't remember.
This is the like think Texas or think a Scottish Highlander mixed with Texas Longhorn, just big horns, big hair,
Okay.
big fucking cow. Stupid friendly creatures.
Nice.
In the wild, they can be aggressive, but only when they feel threatened. So that's like a thing about traveling with the South is when confronted with wildlife in the South, most wildlife in the South is not aggressive towards people. So just stay calm. Don't give them a reason to think something's up. Because otherwise, you're going to get fucking charged by like 67 fucking cows. They do not stop.
Stampedes.
And even with the giants, when it comes to like the mammoths are, they're elephants, they're smart. You don't want to fuck with them too much because they can mess you up, but they're not hostile.
Like the giants in Skyrim. Where it's like, as long as you don't go near them, or they're mammoths, you're chill. Are they kind of like that?
Well, the giants haven't domesticated the mammoths.
No, I'm saying like their
but
aggro range.
Yeah,
where it's
they're,
like
they're
this-
very. But the mammoths, they're just like, or the giants, they're just like people.
Right.
You can interact with them. They just don't nominally consider them a southern kingdom.
Who made them?
So the threat that they are to the south is that of almost like a foreign colony. Even though they're not foreign, they've been here too. They don't consider themselves in any capacity a part of
They're
any
just
colony.
more tribal. They're like even more tribal than the tribal.
Yeah.
Okay. Like can't be reasoned with tribal, where it's like, well, we can sit down with the giant elders and.
You can't really strike a deal with them. We can respect each other's lines, but the problem is how much shit in the story demands we go down here. Who knows?
I know. I don't know. Fuckers.
And that's kind of the question of this region right here, because you got Sarcia, you got the Erasion, you've got the Ludenese woodland range,
Yeah.
and then you've got Quran.
Aromatic people.
So then you got this weird, almost like marsh peninsula.
Yeah. I know.
That's like, yeah, don't go down there. The giants live down there. They don't like it when you show up. But why the fuck do they hang out in this area?
What's below that?
It's below this.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, because we wouldn't know. Unless you sailed around, of course.
Somebody has. They know that's where the landmass ends, but they also know why are the giants just here? It's not like it's beyond them to fucking walk up this way. So
Are
why
they protecting something?
why don't they? Why don't they leave that area?
What are they holding on to? I could see a short story of a man that's looking to strike riches by promise of gold down there.
Plenty have tried.
I'd love to hear that short story of that. That'd be kind of cool.
What is weird though is the Tieways have a certain awareness of the giants because the giants use the black stones too. So we know there's black stones down there, and we know the giants are communing in them because they've seen them.
Damn. Every time, there's always like elements too, which is good because it means like, oh, if we ever are stuck, we have some story elements we can kind of just cement in.
And whip things at a wall.
Oh my god, dude! I don't even know what this video would be called. You gotta come up with one. That's the trademark. And I will cut this dead space out, like I do with mine. Sometimes I'm just like, or I'll keep it. It's just like zoom in slowly, and just end it from there.
And I would have to assume there's large bats.
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 Okay.
And I have to figure. There's so many coastal caves, dude.
I bet.
There's fucking water bats in the south.
I bet there is.
There's diving bats in the south. If you're from the north and you come south, what's gonna scare the shit out of you most? Bats flying out of the fucking water.
This is a horrible place.
Yep. Fish, large fish, are all throughout this ocean. Occasionally you find them in the bay, but they're like big-ass tuna-sized fish. Just stupid big fish.
Yeah, you always see. Yeah.
Eels in the lakes. They got a lot of eels.
This sounds like a very harsh fucking place to be.
Yeah. It's all, they're all edible.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The real difference between like the southern continent and the rest of these is these guys don't have a whole lot of conflict with their environment apart from like the great wolves, the occasional pissed off mammoth and all that. And that's part of the thing of they burned down the forest up to this point. This much of the forest is still like burnt the fuck down, but they've been pushing it back out. And the forest is more or less on their side. You got giant fucking spiders in the forest. What's the rule? Don't fuck with them.
Right.
Then you're fine. They're not out here hunting people down. They're giant spiders. They were here before us. They've got their own fucking operations. But they're not, it's not like Lord of the Rings Shelob where like, yeah, you walk and the spiders start circling around you. No, these spiders don't hunt you per se. They're just big fucking spiders. It's like Australia if everything wasn't poisonous as fuck.
Jeez. Let me go check this and knock on the door. Closing notes.
It's not crazy animals in the south. They're just...
I'm not gonna have to edit that part where it's like make it a separate video.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
It's primeval down there. And... it's not like dinosaurs. It's a little bit of dragons. In the form of drakes. Some big lizards, but only... It's weird because they're like... Anything that is reptilian in the south is some part mammalian as well. Everything in the south has fur.
That makes sense. It's colder down there.
Yep.
Which I always thought was going to be warmer, but which must mean the equatorial line is that how you imagine it?
Something like. I really like, in my head, the map is upside down.
Me too. Like, not physically, but I thought about it too. I was like, the stuff on top should be colder. That must mean that's like, maybe the top right there is where the equatorial line is starting. And you're like way down or something.
Yeah,
or maybe it's a flat disc, and who gives a fuck? That's why I was like, I'm okay with calling it flat Earth. I thought about this many times. I'm like, why is it getting colder the more south you get? That's what he said. All right, I'll do it. I'll try it. And then I was just like, it feels like it's getting warmer down there.
Nope.
But then there's like a desert, like, I don't know. Well, it's a magical desert. Let's call it magical.
Right, it's like the northern Sahara. Like, yeah, it snows in this bitch sometimes, and you're like, it's a desert.
Right.
What do you mean? It just fucking snows sometimes, dude.
And then Murphos actually is under a spell. It will return back to looking like the rest of the world once the prophecy's fulfilled. It's one of the... Well, it's not really because of the prophecy. It's just It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing that I don't need to explain right now. That is not this video. Yeah, this one's everywhere in a good way. It just makes you wonder. Another discussion of the South, maybe. Title or something.
Something.
To blanket it, so that way I don't have to I have to make sure I cut all the parts out where he's talking about animals. Then I'll make that separate, because there's not an audience.
There's this disease that goes through the South that makes everybody nut violently, straight upwards. They call it Roulette Week.
Comes in your chin all the time.
Yeah.
Sucks.
I'm trying to order a sandwich. I'd like a
roulette nut.
South's a weird place, but not like weird, fucked up Dane. That's like the question I've always had with fantasy universes. If there's all these giant, threatening fucking monsters everywhere, how does anybody live?
Yeah, I know. That's why I don't have any in ours. Like, there might be here and there shit, but there's not like a crazy people living with dinosaurs kind of shit.
Yeah, there's all the why are all the dragons almost always gone? How about wyverns exist and they're only about as predatory as like alligators? Like, yeah, they can be around, but it's
Or
not like it's gonna
hippo.
wipe out your fucking village.
Like, yeah, we live with animals like that, like hippos and shit.
Yeah.
Those
If you tell
fuckers
me a
are-
drake is more dangerous than a hippo, I'm gonna call you a liar.
Right.
Yeah, there's no like crazy shit. There's like myths of giant fucking things in the South, but there's already gigantism in the South, so like, yeah, totally possible. But it would be actually like a fucking 50-foot tall dragon. That would actually be a freak occurrence.
Holy shit, that'd be fucking.
That'd be a totally weird fucking thing, and there's nothing to suggest that a 50-foot drake in the South would actually be more aggressive than a normal drake. It'd just be like a
whale.
Yeah, it'd be a basic security concern.
Yeah, God, if it comes through.
Like, that's a particularly large bear. What do we do about that? Has it done anything wrong?
No. Alright, well, fuck off with it, I guess. Leave it over there.
Where does it live? Like, really deep in the mountains, and it keeps hunting yaks. I'm like, well,
They don't have yaks in the mountains.
yeah. I'm gonna walk up there and get them. Fuck no, dude.
It's fine.
It's football.
Right. Give a fuck about it. Well, end the video. What is it called?
Uh-huh. It's called, I was asked one question about genealogies and went on an ethnic rant for an hour.
So what would I call it? Genealogy then ethnic?